Chapter 8 of A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis by Melvin Powers. Chapter 8. What you should know about becoming an excellent subject. Becoming an excellent subject follows the same general rules for becoming proficient in any other endeavor. It depends upon your motivation, persistence, and willingness to devote time and study to the subject. Let us agree that most individuals can learn to play a musical instrument to some degree. This degree is usually sufficient for their own needs. To become a virtuoso, however, it is necessary to study the instrument and devote a great deal of energy and time to practice. The same example could be given for most undertakings. Anyone can learn to hit a golf ball, but being able to control the direction and distance and become a skilled golfer is quite another matter. If you have been successful in accomplishing the first 5 tests, you can consider yourself a good hypnotic subject. Becoming an excellent subject entails following the same procedure used in accomplishing the first 5 tests. Some may proceed very easily into the somnambulistic state, and others may have a difficult time reaching this deepest stage. Understanding some of the psychology involved and assuming the right psychological frame of mind for the attainment of the somnambulistic state is more important than just working blindly in an attempt to get the somnambulistic tests to work. Being irritable, disgusted, and despondent because of your inability to go further into hypnosis is not the answer, and will only lead to frustration and failure. The reader is not to assume he will be a difficult subject. If you have come this far, you'll be able to continue in the same manner. The topic under discussion now is brought up to prepare readers for any contingency that may arise. It's like having a life preserver on a boat. You hope you never need it, but you should be prepared to use it in case of an emergency. It is natural to assume that if you are willing and trying to go into the lethargic, cataleptic, or somnambulistic state, you will be able to do so in a relatively short period of time. Unfortunately, this is by no means the case. Many of the principles of learning and conditioning can be applied to hypnosis, but with many subjects, these laws do not seem applicable. Let us assume you wanted to learn to become an excellent typist. This is a reasonable goal, and all that is necessary is to continue practicing until you have reached the proficiency you set out to achieve. This proficiency would, as a rule, follow application of the laws of learning and conditioning. This isn't always so in the subject's attempt to become somnambulistic. When the subject progresses from one stage to another in a classical manner, the theory works admirably. But what happens when a subject cannot seem to progress any further? He has reached a plateau and is unable to climb higher. He seems to have reached a psychological impasse or stalemate. It is easy to say that the subject is thwarted by a subconscious block and let it go at that. This, however, doesn't stop him in his dilemma. It's like telling the stranded motorist that the reason his car is stalled is because the motor isn't running. The following information will be helpful to those who haven't been able to reach the first stages of hypnosis, as well as those who apparently can only go so far. Actually, the same principles are involved. If the subject doesn't respond or responds to a limited degree, there evidently is a cause or reason for this poor response. In order to continue this discussion, it will be necessary for us to agree that the resistance can be either conscious or unconscious. If the subject insists that he is trying to let go, has nothing to hide, is not afraid of hypnosis, understands what is involved and has strong motivation, we can only assume that the resistance must be unconscious. Usually, it will be necessary to work through this unconscious resistance before the subject responds. If the subject is conditioning himself, this will involve a great deal of introspection, and even then it is an extremely difficult job. One doesn't usually have proper insight into one's own emotional makeup. the end result is that one can only rationalize about his behavior. Let us explore some interesting aspects of hypnosis, with a view toward helping you if you are having difficulty responding the way you desire. I have had the following paradoxical situation happen many times. A subject calls my office, requesting to be conditioned for self-hypnosis. He further requests that he be allowed to bring along a member of his family or a friend for the hypnotic session. These individuals usually ask if I object to this procedure. I interpreted this request as a sign of distrust during my early career as a professional hypnotist. I was affronted by the idea of the unspoken insinuation verbalized by this request. Didn't they trust me? Between trying to defend myself and assuring them that there was no need for another person being present, since my secretary could observe the procedure, I usually won the argument, but lost the client. As I developed understanding into the needs of these persons, I began to realize that the request was not directed at my integrity, but was a safeguard for their ego. Here is an interesting sidelight that has happened frequently in regard to the foregoing situation. I would request the subject to sit near my desk, and tell the onlooker to sit in back and to the side of the subject, away from the subject's view, so as not to distract him. In this situation, I invariably place the hypnodisc on a spinning portable phonograph turntable and turn it upright for the subject to look at. The hypnodisc, which is made of stiff cardboard, looks like a 12-inch phonograph record and has concentric heavy lines drawn on it. As it spins, the subject feels he is being pulled toward the center. At the same time, it causes his eyes to become very tired. I have included a drawing of it on this page for those who are not familiar with this hypnotic device. The revolving hypnodisc causes a physiological reaction and must work with everyone. You feed back certain known physiological responses for the successful attainment of hypnosis. The onlooker has had no choice but to look at the hypnodisc as well. As I suggest to the subject that his eyes are becoming heavy and tired, and that soon he'll have an irresistible impulse to close them, the onlooker is naturally hearing the same suggestion. Because this person feels a part of the hypnotic situation, there can be no conscious resistance. Since these defenses are not hampering the attainment of hypnosis, the onlooker may readily fall under hypnosis. More than once, the onlooker has confided to me that he was getting a better night's sleep, was feeling wonderfully well, or had derived other benefits since coming to my office as an observer. The exact situation happens when the stage hypnotist is hypnotizing subjects on the stage. Many times a person in the audience, who had no intention of becoming hypnotized, becomes influenced in the same manner. Incidentally, these individuals make the best subjects. There are interesting theories as to why a subject responds or does not respond to hypnosis. I think the reader would find some of these theories interesting and perhaps gain some insight into his own hypnotic behavior. These theories are based primarily on the psychoanalytical approach to hypnosis. The most prevalent theory is that the hypnotist represents either the father image, paternal or fear hypnosis, or the mother image, maternal or love hypnosis. The father usually represents an authoritarian figure. The subject's identification can be on a conscious or subconscious level. Let us suppose the subject has ambivalent feelings toward his father. Because of this, he may not respond. Here is an opportunity to frustrate the authoritative father figure. The only trouble with this theory is that if there is an excellent relationship between the father and subject, it doesn't necessarily mean that the subject will respond easily. The stage hypnotist invariably uses a strong, authoritative approach with a great deal of success, but this approach generally does not work best in private practice. I have found that for the majority of subjects, the maternal approach works best. Perhaps the process of hypnosis awakens early unconscious memories of being put to sleep as a child. Some techniques that are used in hypnosis are quite similar to this. The subject, who is lying down, is told to close his eyes and is spoken to in a quiet, reassuring, monotonous tone of voice. The hypnotist is seated near him. The hypnotist even uses the same words that the subject has heard as a child. Sleep. Go to sleep. When you awaken, you'll feel wonderfully well. In fact, I use some special music that I have recorded for inducing hypnosis. The first musical selection is Brahms' Lullaby. Children's music boxes invariably contain this selection, and the melody cannot help but activate a pleasant nostalgia. It is a memory associated with love and tenderness. This brings us to the fact that hypnosis may offer the subject a chance to escape from the reality of pressing problems into a state of complete irresponsibility. In fact, one theory of hypnosis equates the hypnotic state as a form of unconscious regression and need for submission. The male subject may have a strong positive identification with his mother rather than his father. It is part of the unresolved Oedipus complex. He sees his mother as a kind, loving individual, always ready to help. Even if the mother did something socially unacceptable, the individual would defend her vehemently. The father, who might do something wrong, would rarely be excused. Just the opposite is true with the female subject. When asking the female child, "Whose girl are you?" the answer is invariably, "Daddy's girl." When asking the male child, "Whose boy are you?" the answer is invariably, "Mama's boy." We accept this transference of identification as a normal process of growing up. When it isn't normally resolved, it can account for severe personality problems. One might assume, therefore, that a woman hypnotist could better hypnotize a male subject, and a male hypnotist could better hypnotize a female subject. But this is not true, except for cases such as we have just mentioned. One school of thought feels that there is a strong submissive tendency in all of us, and hypnosis gratifies this wish. The individual's need for dependence is also met. In this case, the hypnotist becomes omnipotent, being able to alter feelings that ordinarily distress the individual. Normally, adults, when confronted by a particularly upsetting experience, might want to be held closely by an intimate friend or member of the family. Don't we frequently put our arm around a friend in grief, trying to comfort him? The inner strength which is created by hypnosis within the total personality structure of the subject lessens dependency upon the hypnotist, much in the same fashion as we need the doctor less as we start to recover from an illness. Self-hypnosis further lessens dependency, for no authoritarian figure is used. The subject's attitude toward authority is important to know. It is well known that officers in the Army are more difficult to hypnotize than non-commissioned men. The enlisted man, by a process of indoctrination and conditioning, is taught to obey and follow orders without reasoning. The transference of authority to the hypnotist is readily accomplished because of this conditioning process. The Army doctor, when treating patients psychologically, replaces his Army jacket with a regular white medical jacket to increase rapport. One interesting theory is that the subject responds as he thinks the hypnotist would like him to. This is termed role-playing. When asking a subject under hypnosis his name, you usually get a very slow, deliberate answer, as though the subject were in a trance. You tell him that he can answer in a normal speaking voice and tempo, and his further replies are to be in the same manner as his waking state. Another theory along these lines is that the subject acts as he believes a hypnotized person would act. This too is role-playing, but it does not explain analgesia, such as when the dentist hypnotizes the patient and proceeds to drill a tooth. No one, with the possible exception of a highly neurotic, psychic masochist, is going to endure excruciating pain just to please the doctor. One theory about hypnosis states that it allows the subject an opportunity of identifying with the hypnotist, whom he sees as a powerful figure. Through this identification, the subject is able to gain inner strength. On the other hand, the subject might rebel against the submissive nature of the hypnotic setting. This could easily create anxiety, which in turn could create hostility, resulting in resistance of various kinds. As a result of this, the subject might begin to criticize the hypnotist, find fault with the way he, the subject, is being handled, question the judgment of the hypnotist, or doubt the effectiveness of the hypnotic procedure. Many investigators assert that the rapport, meaning the relationship between the subject and hypnotist, is all important. This is true, and the relationship can and does have many ramifications. In psychotherapy, the term transference is used to denote this relationship. The relationship is further described as a good or bad transference. There is also a countertransference, which indicates the reaction of the therapist to the patient. Naturally, in order for the subject to respond, there must be good rapport. I have tried to indicate that there are complexities that may arise in the hypnotic setting. There are many conflicting theories as to why a subject does or does not respond. There are no set rules to follow, and one's intuition, experience, and judgment help solve any problem that arises. Let me relate another frequent incident. I have had subjects come to me after they were unable to be hypnotized by several other professional hypnotists. They have complained that the hypnotists weren't good hypnotists because they couldn't hypnotize them. After all, they ask, hadn't they been willing subjects? My usual answer is that the fault, if there is one, is not with the hypnotists and really not with the subjects. It is a matter of exploring what has happened and then deciding on a course of action to ensure success. I am firmly convinced that the subject responds when he is positively, without equivocation, ready to do so. He keeps testing the response to make sure he is in control. He fears a reduction in his voluntary level of reality attachment and control. Unresponsiveness proves to him that he has this control. As long as he does this, which is a natural response, he never lets go sufficiently to attain hypnosis. Hypnosis, as we know, is a very sensitive state. It requires complete faith and trust in the hypnotist. If it is lacking, the subject never does respond. The phenomenon of hypnosis is entirely subjective in nature, and its success lies within the total personality structure of the subject. If there is resistance to hypnosis itself or to the deepening state, the subject, by his own honest evaluation and verbalization of his resistance, can do much to become a better subject. Hypnosis must begin with the acceptance by the subject of certain basic fundamentals that we have already discussed, rather than of the forcefulness of the hypnotist. The deepening of the hypnotic state lies in the intensification of the condition-response mechanism once it has been initiated. You should not expect to achieve immediate results, although sometimes this does happen. As you continue to work with perseverance, intelligence, and enthusiasm, you will definitely achieve the goals that you have set for yourself. It is well to remember that you guide yourself toward the somnambulistic state, depending upon your belief and acceptance of those principles that have been outlined for you. I have attempted to point out some of the salient points and theories to keep in mind in your attempt to develop into an excellent hypnotic subject. Some of these only pertain to the situations where the hypnotist works with the subject. Many of the problems inherent in this setting are not applicable to the situation where the subject is hypnotizing himself. Both settings have their advantages and disadvantages. As long as you proceed to follow the instructions given you, you can feel assured that you will finally achieve self-hypnosis. It should be emphasized that it is vital to adopt the right frame of mind in your attempt to achieve self-hypnosis, particularly a deep state. If you approach hypnosis with a prove-it-to-me attitude, nothing is going to happen. Self-hypnosis requires practicing a set of mental exercises or mental gymnastics. To acquire the ultimate from this training requires systematic conditioning. The word training is used quite extensively in hypnotic literature. The use of the word implies that hypnosis can be attained by a training period. The literature speaks frequently of a subject being trained to respond in a certain way. Obviously, this means over a certain period of time. It also means you train yourself to become a good hypnotic subject. It is a skill that all can acquire. There are 4 books dealing specifically with self-hypnosis that I would recommend to you for further reading. They are What is Hypnosis? By Andrew Salter, Hypnosis and Self-Hypnosis by Bernard Hollander, M.D., Autogenic Training by Johannes H. Schultz, M.D., and Self-Hypnosis, Its Theory, Technique, and Application by Melvin Powers. End of Chapter 8. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 9 of A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis by Melvin Powers. Chapter 9. Techniques for Reaching the Somnambulistic State. As indicated in the last chapter, the attainment of the somnambulistic stage of hypnosis can represent an extremely intricate procedure. Because of certain inherent characteristics of this stage, it is easier to attain by hetero-hypnosis. However, this does not preclude the fact that it can be reached without the aid of a hypnotist. More important than the testing and deepening procedures that I shall outline for you in this chapter are an understanding and an awareness of some of the complexities involved, first in achieving the hypnotic state, then deepening, and finally reaching somnambulism. There are no absolute or final answers to the many problems that can arise. You can become entangled with rationalization so easily when you want the facts to fit a particular theory. I point this out to the reader because, as the subject goes deeper, the procedure can become more complicated. There are many interesting phenomena which can be elicited in the somnambulistic state. They are of interest for the most part to students of abnormal behavior and are pertinent from an academic viewpoint. They do not fall within the province of this book or of hypnosis for therapeutic purposes and might lead the reader astray. Should readers be interested in further hypnotic phenomena, I refer them to Modern Hypnosis by Leslie Kuhn and Salvador Russo, Ph.D., Experimental Hypnosis by Leslie Lecron, Time Distortion in Hypnosis by Milton Erickson, M.D., and Lynn F. Cooper, M.D., and Hypnotism, An Objective Study of Suggestibility by Andre M. Weizenhofer, Ph.D. As discussed previously, some individuals experience difficulty in attaining the deeper hypnotic states. My advice is to be patient and to continue working with yourself. It is not imperative or vital to reach the somnambulistic stage for therapeutic results. It is a misconception on the part of many students that they must go into the deepest state possible to obtain results. Dramatic changes can come about at all levels of hypnosis. The somnambulistic stage is necessary in hypnotherapy when there is a need for the patient to relieve some traumatic episode. It is also useful when the patient is reluctant to consciously discuss certain aspects of his problem. Many hypnotherapeutic techniques such as amnesia, hypermnesia, progression, paramnesia, automatic writing, dream induction, regression, production of experimental conflicts, and crystal or mirror gazing require a somnambulistic state. For those of you interested in hypnotherapy, I can recommend no finer book than Hypnotherapy of War Neurosis by John G. Watkins, Ph.D. In this book, the theory of hypnotherapy has been diagrammatically presented for easy comprehension and shown to be an amalgamation of concepts and practices from various schools of thought. Most students of hypnosis equate the phenomenon of amnesia with the somnambulistic state. The mistake they make is in trying to achieve amnesia. It's similar to the dog trying to catch his tail. It is impossible for the subject to effectively suggest amnesia to himself. If he remembers what he was supposed to forget, he has failed. If he truly doesn't remember what he was supposed to forget, he doesn't even remember the amnesia suggestion and can take no satisfaction from his success because he is not aware that he has accomplished the post-hypnotic suggestion. Unless an elaborate set of post-hypnotic suggestions are worked out, it is an impossible test for self-hypnosis. I know the reader is anxious to begin his conditioning for the somnambulistic state, but there are still a few pertinent remarks which should be remembered before proceeding further. The reader should not memorize verbatim any of the tests involved in proving the somnambulistic state. All that is necessary to remember is the general form and the goal you seek. The goal is to increase your suggestibility, which in turn means deepening of the hypnotic state. After each step, you are to give yourself suggestions that you will go still deeper the next time. You should also designate a specific length of time to work with self-hypnosis. The suggestions are as follows: I shall work with self-hypnosis for 15 minutes. At the end of that time, I shall open my eyes and wake up feeling wonderfully well. I'll be wide awake and refreshed. In case of any danger, I'll be able to awaken immediately and act accordingly. Some hypnotists tell their subjects to make your mind a blank. I suppose that what they really mean is that you must try to think of only what the hypnotist is saying. Have you ever tried to make your mind a blank? Try it for a moment. It's an impossibility. Should the hypnotist persist along these lines, he'll never be successful. It is the wrong approach. The subject, because of his inability to comply with this suggestion, is fighting a losing battle. It is also almost impossible for the subject to concentrate only on what the hypnotist is saying. Any word the hypnotist says can start a conscious as well as an unconscious train of thought. Therefore, in reality, this too is impossible. However, it really isn't necessary that the subject keep his thoughts concentrated solely on what is being said so long as they are kept in the general area. At times, the more you try to concentrate, the more your thoughts become scattered. Suppose I say to you, forget the address 8721 Sunset Boulevard. What happens? The more you try to forget it, the more you remember it. Therefore, don't be concerned if you experience stray thoughts during the induction and deepening of hypnosis. You are now ready to continue with further tests. The first 5 tests should be mastered before continuing. Test number 6 is referred to as the fly test. In this test, once under hypnosis, you picture that a fly is crawling on the back of your right or left hand. Once you feel the fly, you know you are deeply hypnotized. You might even get an urge to move your hand and flick the fly off your hand. When this happens, you know, of course, that you are deeply hypnotized. Here is a sample of the type of suggestions to give. As I count to 10, and even before I reach the count of 10, I shall feel a fly crawling on the back of my right hand. This illusion will seem very real to me. 1. My right hand is completely relaxed. 2. I feel completely at ease. 3. I am beginning to feel a pleasant tingling feeling on the back of my right hand. 4. This feeling is becoming strong. 5. It feels as though a fly is moving on the back of my hand. 6. I have had this same feeling before. 7. I can feel the fly. 8. The feeling is very definite. 9. As I flick my hand, the fly will disappear. If you have felt the fly, move your hand. 10. It is gone. Test number 7 is known as the cigarette test, and naturally is only for those of you who smoke. In this test, you give yourself post-hypnotic suggestions during the hypnotic state, awaken yourself, and then note the effects of the post-hypnotic suggestions. If the cigarette tastes bitter or has a repugnant taste or odor, and if you furthermore find it impossible to smoke more than 3 puffs, necessitating your putting out the cigarette, you know the post-hypnotic suggestions are working perfectly and that you are an excellent hypnotic subject. Here are the suggestions to give yourself while under hypnosis. As I count to 3, I shall feel the warm, pleasant rays of the sun on my face and hands. 1. The cloud is moving, and I can begin to feel the warm, pleasant rays of the sun. 2. The cloud is moving more and more, exposing more and more of the sun. I can feel the warmth of the sun's rays. 3. The cloud has moved away from the sun, and I can feel the full, warm strength of the sun. It is a pleasant feeling, but as I continue to count to 5, the warm feeling will dissipate. 4. The warm feeling is leaving. 5. The warm feeling has left, and I feel perfectly normal in every respect. A variation of this test is to see yourself lying comfortably in front of a fireplace. In this instance, you imagine someone is adding wood to the fire. As this is done, you feel the warm glow of the fire more and more. Should you use the fireplace technique, try to incorporate the sound of rain into the picture. If you hear rain, you have created a positive auditory hallucination and consider yourself an excellent subject. You can also visualize a situation where you would be cold. This is not as pleasant as the picture that one can conjure up about a fireplace, and thus creates a bit more resistance since no one wants to feel uncomfortable. Test number 9 is the breeze test. It can be combined with the previous test. After you attain the feeling of warmth, you give yourself a count of 3, or whatever number you want, suggesting that you will feel the cool ocean breeze, if you are at the beach, on your face and hands. You can even carry this step further, suggesting that you'll even smell the odor of the salt water. This is known as an olfactory illusion, and should you be able to create this effect, you can be sure that you are a somnambulistic subject. Here are suggestions you can use. As I count to 3, I shall gradually feel the cool ocean breeze coming over the waves. It will be a very pleasant feeling. 1. I am beginning to feel the cool ocean breeze, especially on my face and hands. 2. The breeze is becoming stronger and stronger. 3. I can definitely feel the cool ocean breeze. As I continue to count to 5, I shall smell the pleasant, healthy aroma of the salt water. 4. I am beginning to smell the salt water. 5. I can definitely smell the salt water. Now you give yourself appropriate suggestions that the feeling, illusion, will vanish as you awaken or at a specific count. It can be as simple as this: as I count to 3, I shall open my eyes and awaken feeling very refreshed. The feeling of the cool ocean breeze and smell of the salt air will have vanished completely. At this point, you count to 3 and open your eyes. Test number 10 is the hand clasp test. This is used frequently to test the depth of hypnosis. You fold your hands with your fingers tightly interlocked and place your palms together. You then give yourself a hypnotic suggestion that at the count of 3, it will be impossible for you to unlock your hands. After you try and are unable to unlock your hands, you continue counting to 5, suggesting that you will be able to do so when you reach the count of 5. Incidentally, you should remove any ring you may be wearing before trying this test. Here are a few suggestions that you can follow. As I complete the count of 3, I shall try to unlock my hands, but will be unable to do so until I count to 5. 1. My hands are locked tightly together. 2. My fingers are locked tighter and tighter. 3. It is impossible for me to unlock my hands until I count to 5. 4. As I reach the count of 5, I shall be able to unlock my hands very easily. 5. I can now unlock my hands very easily. Test number 11 is the arm test. Here is another test used frequently to test the receptiveness to hypnosis. Make a tight fist and extend your arm in front of you as far as possible. Visualize your arm as one solid mass, as stiff and rigid as a bar of steel. After your arm is extended, give yourself a hypnotic suggestion that you will be able to bend your arm when you complete the count of 3. As you continue to count to 5, you will be able to bend your arm very easily. Here is a form of suggestion you can use. As I reach the count of 3, I shall try to bend my arm, but it will be impossible to do so until I count to 5. No matter how hard I try, it will be absolutely impossible. 1. My arm is stiff and rigid as a bar of steel. 2. I can feel the rigidity in my arm. 3. It is impossible for me to bend my arm until I count to 5. 4. I can feel the stiffness slowly leaving. 5. I can now bend my arm easily and it feels normal in every respect. Test number 12 is the eye test. This is probably the most widely used test in hypnosis. Many subjects equate the inability to open the eyes with hypnosis. Many assume that if they can open their eyes, they have not been hypnotized. I must emphatically point out that this is not true. The subject can fail the eye test and yet have been under hypnosis. In the deep somnambulistic state, the subject can open his eyes without affecting the depth of the hypnotic state. In fact, this is done many times in getting the subject to do automatic writing, crystal gazing, mirror gazing, hypnodrama, and revivification. In carrying out post-hypnotic suggestions in any state, the subject is frequently told that he will open his eyes and carry out the suggestion. I have found that there is more anxiety connected with the eye test than any other test. I feel that it is a normal reaction and one that must be anticipated by the hypnotist as well as the subject. Occasionally, while hypnotizing a new subject, he will open his eyes. This can happen when the subject feels he is losing consciousness. His ability to open his eyes proves to him that he is in control. One of the main fears that the subject has is his belief that he will lose voluntary control of himself. The fact that he can open his eyes lessens his anxiety. If there seems to be too much threat to the individual, I use a method that you can follow. Instead of suggesting that the subject will be unable to open his eyes at a specific count, I suggest that he will be so relaxed that it will be too much effort to open his eyes until a further count is given. Actually, what could take less effort? Here are suggestions you can use. As I count to 3, I shall try to open my eyes, but I shall be unable to do so because I feel so relaxed. It will just take too much effort to open my eyes until I reach the count of 5 or tell myself to awaken. 1. My eyes are closed and I am in a very deep state of hypnosis. 2. My eyelids are stuck tightly together. 3. It is now impossible for me to open my eyes. I shall be able to open them, though, at the count of 5. 4. I shall be able to open my eyes very easily at the count of 5. 5. I can now open my eyes and wake up feeling alert and fully refreshed. In accomplishing the eye test, you try to create a vivid picture of yourself being completely and fully relaxed. If you really exerted a great deal of effort, you could open your eyes, but because of the pleasantness of the completely relaxed state, you prefer not to do so. It can be likened to your enduring the cold winter air when you are half asleep in bed instead of getting up to close the window which has been left open too much. You can, of course, get up and close the window, but it becomes a matter of expending too much energy. Instead, you choose to endure the discomfort or suggest that your spouse close the window. For the following 3 tests, you give yourself the suggestions as outlined in the previous tests. It should be pointed out again that at the conclusion of the test, you give yourself a suggestion that you will feel normal in every respect. Test number 13 is the music test. This involves creating an auditory hallucination. Give yourself the suggestion that at a specific count, you will hear your favorite song. It will last for 1 minute and then fade out. Test number 14 is the dream test. It is incorporated in a great deal of hypnotherapy. The subject is told that as the hypnotist counts to 3, the subject will have a dream lasting for several minutes, which he will remember. The dream, furthermore, will call his attention to an important incident that he has long forgotten, yet which will be relevant to his problem. In self-hypnosis, you suggest to yourself that at a specific count, you will have a very pleasant dream lasting for several minutes, at the end of which time you will awaken feeling refreshed. For those readers further interested in producing dreams, I can highly recommend a very fascinating book called The Experimental Production of Dreams During Hypnosis by Professor David Bowen Klein. Test number 15 is the anesthesia test. This is conducted by telling yourself that you will not feel the pain associated with the act of pinching yourself. You suggest that you will feel the pressure of your fingers but will not feel the pain involved. I urge the reader not to stick pins in himself to test the anesthesia. This can be dangerous, lead to infection, and cause other harmful results. You should also not dig your nails into your skin to make sure that you don't feel pain. End of Chapter 9. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 10 of A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis by Melvin Powers. Chapter 10. A New Approach to Self-Hypnosis When All Else Fails. Let us assume that you have tried diligently to learn self-hypnosis for a month or more, but have failed. You have worked faithfully, following the instructions outlined in this book and other books on self-hypnosis, but somehow the state of hypnosis eludes you. Should you give up in despair, or is there still hope for you? Let me assure you that you can still become an excellent subject. Let us examine several areas of this problem and a new approach that will help you achieve your ends. You must first of all ask yourself if you are feeling better and whether you have made strides in the direction you desire, while giving yourself suggestions in whatever stage of hypnosis you have achieved. If your evaluation is affirmative to any degree, you can expect even greater results. But, you may say, how can I expect greater results when I haven't achieved self-hypnosis? My answer is, you may be achieving self-hypnosis and not know it. The change to the self-hypnotic state from the waking state can be very imperceivable. Many times, prior to testing subjects under hypnosis, I ask them if they think they are in the hypnotic state. The answer is invariably no. When asking the subjects for a cogent reason for this answer, they usually exclaim that they are aware of what is going on and do not feel any different than they did before I started working with them. They are amazed to find that various tests work so perfectly. Some subjects do not respond to hypnotic tests no matter how long you work with them. For these persons, I usually de-emphasize the need for passing the tests and concentrate on the therapeutic results which are desired. This approach lessens anxiety and usually results in a deepening of the hypnotic state. It is my feeling that many subjects resist any tests, as the implication is that once the tests work, the subject is under complete control of the hypnotist. The subject may fear this supposed subjection on one hand, and yet want it on the other hand. These forces can work unconsciously, and thus the attainment of hypnosis becomes a very intricate, perplexing, and trying procedure. Even though this may be so, I can assure you that the problem and attainment of hypnosis can be resolved. It is only a matter of motivation on the part of the subject. This is the main ingredient necessary for successful hypnosis. Let me now explain a technique which has worked admirably for many who have been frustrated because of their inability to achieve self-hypnosis. It involves pretending you are hypnotized and going through the motions of the various tests as though you were a perfect subject. You will recall that one theory of hypnosis is that the subject behaves in a manner that he believes is in keeping with hypnotic behavior. This role-playing is the basis for our unique approach. As the subject continues this procedure, he takes on the condition-response mechanism necessary for self-hypnosis. Let us look at the following examples of role-playing. During the war, many soldiers who wanted to leave the army would pretend something was wrong with them. They would convince the authorities of the authenticity of their illness, and since nothing seemed to make them better, they eventually were separated from the service because of the incapacitating disorder. But what happened to many of these malingerers after they were released from the service? I'm sure you know the rest of the story. The constant malingering was transformed by this role-playing into a condition-response pattern, eventually bringing about the very undesirable condition responsible for their leaving the service. I saw some of these individuals, and more than once they told me that they had unwittingly hypnotized themselves into having the ailment. They wanted me to dehypnotize them. They actually turned out to be very easy subjects as they had become highly suggestible. Unfortunately, their superego structure was weak. They had difficulty in identifying strongly with anyone, and the relationship in hypnosis was superficial and without depth. I am going to relate another example which I hope will help you understand the role-playing technique for self-hypnosis. I have had the following experience many times in giving hypnotic demonstrations before various organizations. For some reason, even though I carefully ask that only those who desire to be hypnotized volunteer as subjects for the hypnotic demonstrations, an individual who has no intention of cooperating comes up on the stage to poke fun at the hypnotist. In giving public demonstrations, I usually work with about 10 subjects and simultaneously give them the same suggestions and post-hypnotic suggestions. Once the subjects are hypnotized, I work with them with their eyes open. Using this technique, with each subject carrying out a post-hypnotic suggestion, intensifies the responses of other subjects. There is also competitiveness to become the best subject. In the meantime, the individual who is really not under hypnosis has let the audience know about it by winking or making a grimace when I was not looking at him. Observing laughter and other audience reactions which are not in keeping with what is happening at the precise moment during my lecture is my cue that I have an egocentric person on stage. You might ask yourself, can't you tell when someone is faking? It is extremely difficult many times to do so. Once you are aware of it, however, you give certain tests to the group. The exhibitionist doesn't know how to respond each time, and you soon pick him out. Even when I know specifically who it is, I do not dismiss him. Interestingly, it is invariably a man. I continue with the lecture demonstration, but I let the audience know that I am aware of the situation. This is the interesting part of this example. The bumptious subject, by giving himself auto-suggestions to comply with various post-hypnotic suggestions, is actually engaging in our technique of role-playing. The inevitable happens. He finds himself hypnotized, despite his obvious intention not to be affected in any way. Any hypnotist can recount similar incidents. What can you learn by the example just presented? What if you purposely set about doing the same thing in your attempt to achieve self-hypnosis? The obvious answer is that the technique has a good chance of working, and as a result you will achieve self-hypnosis. This method has worked with many recalcitrant subjects. To follow this plan, go back to Chapter 6, How to Attain Self-Hypnosis, and use the role-playing technique. You'll be pleasantly surprised at how this approach will act as a catalyst. Remember, once you obtain the eye closure, give yourself whatever therapeutic suggestion you desire, plus the post-hypnotic suggestion that the next time you will fall into a deeper and sounder state of hypnosis at the count of 3 or any other cue you desire. I know you may protest using the role-playing technique with the question, if I'm not under hypnosis, why give myself therapeutic post-hypnotic suggestions to condition myself to go under hypnosis at a specific count? You may further protest that you are only fooling yourself. My answer is, what if you are? What is lost by doing it? You have everything to gain and nothing to lose. Are you not really interested in the end result and not the means? The attainment of the self-hypnotic state is not in itself the end result. It is a means to help you achieve your goal. Don't many people carry or wear good luck charms of a religious or non-religious nature? Don't we accept these items in our society? The four-leaf clover and rabbit's foot, as symbols of good luck, have been part of our culture for a long time. We are all sophisticated enough to know that they do not have an intrinsic value, but don't they do something for our mental attitude? This same problem is precisely what you are to follow in using the role-playing technique. If you believe, expect, and imagine that you will be successful in this approach to self-hypnosis, I can assure you that you will. May I urge you not to reject this novel and unorthodox approach. Many have had excellent results when other methods, even those of a professional hypnotist, have failed. Some of you may recognize this approach as another means of applying the visual imagery technique. Whatever you choose to call it, I reiterate, you can expect good results. It is only necessary that you follow the instructions and adopt the right attitude. By the right attitude, I mean that you should adopt the conviction that you are going to achieve self-hypnosis, even though you might have experienced difficulty up to now. Hypnosis is a conviction phenomenon. It is possible that you may say you are not suggestible. Actually, your lack of response proves your suggestibility. You have been influenced by negative suggestions. Everyone is suggestible to some degree. You have become extremely suggestible to conscious or unconscious stimuli, which are definitely affecting your ability to respond. You need only use this latent suggestibility and make it work for you. What would you say about the suggestibility of a person who doesn't want to talk about hypnosis? This person has never read a book on hypnosis and absolutely doesn't want you or anyone else to hypnotize him. Would you believe this person is a potentially good hypnotic subject? I can tell you by practical experience that once this person allows himself to be hypnotized, he turns out to be a perfect subject. Responding to either end of the suggestibility scale is indicative of success with hypnosis. It becomes a matter of manipulating this suggestibility skillfully in order to achieve results. Let me give you another example which may help. Which one of these two lines drawn on this page is longer, line AB or line CD? What is your answer? Did you think both were the same? Take a ruler and actually measure them. You'll find line AB longer than CD. But, you reply, every other time both lines were the same. This is a familiar optical illusion, which is used many times in basic courses in psychology. It is known as the Mueller-Lyer illusion. My contention is that if you said, both are the same size, you are potentially a good subject. You respond perfectly to previous conditioning, thus you are responding as anticipated. If, on the other hand, you picked line AB, you are normally suggestible. If you honestly picked line CD, you are extremely cautious and respond best to reverse psychology. Once again, you are highly suggestible, but toward one extreme. Here's another interesting experiment. Would you say that lines AB and CD were perfectly straight? I'll let you figure out what your response means to this test by yourself. You can take a ruler to determine if the lines are straight. We all respond unconsciously to stimuli of some sort. Word association tests are based on this principle. Aren't your reactions automatic to the following terms? Democratic Party, Republican Party, Communist Party, mother, father, movie star. If I mention the name of a famous person, city, or country, the same immediate unconscious reaction takes place. Let's try it. Theodore Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Dwight D. Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, Albert Einstein, Albert Schweitzer, Eleanor Roosevelt, Boston, New York City, Hollywood, Miami Beach, United States, England, France, Italy, Israel, Africa, Russia, China, India, and South America. The response and image keep changing, don't they? I am trying to point out that this reaction is automatic because of previous conditioning. I could mention almost anything and the same automatic reaction would take place. The reaction would always be the same unless something had happened to change or alter your response. Let us mention the word hypnosis. Some sort of reaction must take place. This can either be positive, negative, or neutral for our purposes. You really don't have to think about your response, as it is automatic. The point to remember is that a definite response has taken place, which will either help or hinder your attainment of hypnosis. If the response should be negative, it can be changed by gaining knowledge and actual experience in hypnosis. It is natural to have a bit of uneasiness when first experiencing or thinking about being hypnotized. After all, you haven't been exposed to hypnosis in a therapeutic setting and couldn't have formed a favorable reaction. Your response is probably derived from a fictionalization of hypnosis. The initial task of the hypnotist is to create, by educating the prospective subject, a favorable attitude so that the subject allows himself to be hypnotized. What does this mean specifically to you if you are having difficulty learning self-hypnosis? It means that through repeated exposures, you will finally respond. You will realize there is no need for anxiety in regard to your response. This inner feeling will, in turn, have a cumulative, favorable effect upon your unconsciousness, which will result in your finally responding to hypnosis. Suppose you still maintain and insist that you are not suggestible and wonder if you will ever respond to hypnosis. Furthermore, the assurance I have given you up to this point doesn't seem to convince you. If you have tried diligently to achieve self-hypnosis, you cannot be blamed, but let's try an experiment to test your suggestibility. It is well to ponder my statement that if you do not respond, it is a sign of being suggestible, but in a negative sense. Lack of response is a manifestation of this negative suggestibility. My contention is that you are definitely suggestible. Let us see what happens to you in trying the following classical experiment. It is called Chevreul's pendulum test. Draw a circle with about a 6-inch diameter and mark it as shown in the illustration. Next, take a ring and attach a string to it. If you have a locket, it will do as well. The hypnotist uses a crystal ball and chain for this experiment. Hold the end of the string or chain and keep the ring or whatever object you are using about 3 inches above the center of the circle. Now concentrate and fix your gaze on the ring, crystal ball, or locket. Mentally suggest to yourself that the object will begin to revolve in a circular manner following the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Picture in your mind's eye that this circular motion is becoming wider and wider. Work at this image for several minutes. Did the object begin turning to the right following the numbers? Did the circle become larger and larger? If it did, you are absolutely suggestible, are influenced by your own suggestions, and therefore, if you follow instructions, can learn self-hypnosis. You can be trained to acquire this skill. If the experience did not work, try it again. Concentrate harder and try to visualize more intently the object revolving in a circular manner. You are not to rotate the object consciously or help it in any way. The action must stem from your subconscious. The thought of the crystal ball or ring revolving in a clockwise or counterclockwise direction invariably causes an involuntary muscle reflex action to take place. This phenomenon is known as ideomotor action. Usually, as the subject concentrates more intensely, the reflex action becomes more profound, causing greater unconscious movement of the hand, which in turn is transmitted to the object in the form of larger circles and greater momentum. The time required for the successful accomplishment of this test depends upon the degree of suggestibility of the subject. An interesting action is to see the object revolve in an opposite direction than suggested. It gives a clue to the personality structure of the individual. The Ouija board works on the same principle as Chevreul's pendulum test. Many times the aspirant will remark, "I swear I didn't make it move." Mentalists find hidden objects in the audience using basically the same approach, combined with clever techniques of distraction. The term given for this is muscle reading. This is the point in question. If the crystal ball, ring, or locket moves without conscious direction, you have successfully influenced your subconscious mind. Self-hypnosis involves the same procedure. The goal is to consciously cause a subconscious reaction. If the experiment does not work with your eyes open, try it with your eyes closed for about 5 minutes. You will be pleasantly surprised with the results. Should you want to prove to yourself that you are suggestible with your eyes open, practice the technique every day for a week or 2. The idea of the practice sessions is to reinforce and increase the response of the unconscious movement until you develop proficiency. It follows the laws of the conditioned reflex theory expounded by Dr. Ivan P. Pavlov, the famous Russian psychologist. If after several weeks you should still not be successful, use the role-playing technique. Consciously make the object revolve. After a while, it will move automatically whenever you attempt the experiment. When this happens, you will have proof of your suggestibility. It is highly improbable that you will not be successful. It would be a rare occurrence. By the same systematic efforts, I can assure you that you can achieve self-hypnosis. If you are still not affected favorably, you might consider one of the psychological means of inducing hypnosis. The next chapter will discuss this topic. I would recommend Pavlov's book called Conditioned Reflexes. Pavlov's book will further explain and clarify the concept of the conditioned response mechanism. It covers necessary conditions for the development of conditioned responses, their formulation by means of conditioned and direct stimuli, plus a tremendous amount of material which will help you in your understanding of the significance of the role-playing technique in relationship to learning self-hypnosis. End of Chapter 10. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 11 of A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis by Melvin Powers. Chapter 11. Psychological Aids and Their Function. Psychological or mechanical aids are used to help put the subject in a state of hypnosis. The use of the aids helps increase the suggestibility of the subject toward hypnosis. The two most widely used hypnotic aids are the crystal ball and chain and the 12-inch hypnodisc. One reason is that these two items have no other use or function outside of the area of hypnosis. Therefore, when the hypnotist proceeds to use one of these hypnotic devices, it must follow that a certain mental set, readiness, or receptivity must follow as a result of its introduction into the hypnotic setting. If the subject is uneasy about the hypnotic setting or his response, the introduction of the hypnotic aid can mobilize the subject's defenses, which may be on a conscious or unconscious level. Generally, the mental set which follows helps augment whatever hypnotic suggestions are given. Certainly the same mental set would not follow if the hypnotist used a paperclip as a means of helping with the induction of hypnosis. It would only start the subject wondering about the relationship of the paperclip to hypnosis. It obviously isn't in keeping with what the subject expects. It is important to utilize the subject's expectation as to what he believes takes place in the setting, as long as this expectation does not hinder the induction of hypnosis. The mere act of turning down the lights or drawing the curtains before the hypnotist begins to work with the subject is a nonverbal suggestion which can be considered as a psychological aid. The subject knows that the hypnotist is ready to begin at this point. Actually, it isn't necessary to darken the room at any time to induce hypnosis. Doesn't the stage hypnotist work with glaring lights? The room is darkened, and I might add that I use this procedure myself, mainly for the psychological effect. If I feel that this procedure might cause anxiety, I proceed with the room undarkened. In discussing psychological aids, it is agreed that we are primarily interested in seeing the subject feel better or achieve whatever goals he seeks through the intelligent application of hypnosis. If a hypnotic aid will help the subject achieve hypnosis, we can concur it is justified. It is not to be considered a subterfuge. If the physician administers a placebo to a patient with the remark, "Here is a new medicine that can help your condition," and if this technique does help alleviate the patient's condition, it is considered good medicine. You must know beforehand that in using the 12-inch hypnodisc, the subject's eyes must begin to water, his eyelids must get heavy, and eventually he must close them. Even before you begin to use the hypnodisc, you suggest that these conditions will take place. During the induction of hypnosis, as these reactions are noted by the subject, a favorable, psychological attitude automatically develops, which in turn helps further suggestions. If the subject reacts favorably to suggestions A, B, and C, it follows that he is more prone to accept suggestions D, E, and F, which are therapeutic in nature. The subject can better relate to the latter suggestions when he has seen proof of his initial suggestibility. This approach works better than beginning immediately with the latter suggestions. The buildup of suggestions convinces the subject he is in a heightened state of suggestibility and can benefit from the therapeutic suggestions of the hypnotist or his own. Perhaps this needed assurance is so helpful because it eliminates the anxiety of the subject concerning his suggestibility. He seeks and needs the satisfaction of knowing he has attained the prerequisites necessary before any therapeutic program can benefit him. The subject's prerequisites need not be actually related to the hypnotic process per se, but merely match his preconceived ideas about what is necessary. Let me give you an example. Many subjects feel that they must experience amnesia before they can benefit from hypnotic suggestions. This premise is inaccurate, since favorable and lasting results can be achieved in any degree of hypnosis, depending, of course, on the nature of the problem. Let me relate several interesting occurrences that take place every so often in my own practice as a professional hypnotist. A subject who is responding well to hypnosis, but not to the point of amnesia, insists that he will not benefit until he is knocked out and doesn't remember what happened. Trying to convince him otherwise proves fatal. He just refuses to accept whatever explanation you give him. My own method is not to insist that the subject is wrong, but somehow to use his misconception in a constructive manner. After getting him into the cataleptic state, I suggest that I am going to stop talking for 5 minutes, during which time he is to mentally repeat "sleep" as he slowly and deeply inhales, and "deep sleep" as he slowly exhales. At the end of this time, he'll be in a very deep hypnotic state. Instead of remaining quiet for 5 minutes, I take 10 minutes. I then begin to whisper suggestions to the subject to determine if he is still under hypnosis or asleep. If he is asleep, I let him remain asleep for a still longer period of time, after which interval I awaken him. I ask him if he remembers what I said to him during the time he was deeply hypnotized. If he says no, I remark, "Very good. I further point out to him that he has now experienced amnesia and will now make rapid strides. The subject, on the other hand, is pleased to see that I now agree with him, and in fact, the interesting result is that he does make excellent progress, because his preconceived requirements have been met. It should be pointed out that I keep working with the subject until such a time that he falls asleep. The transition from hypnosis to sleep is normal. It is easy for the subject to fall asleep because he is so relaxed. Let me tell you of a similar experience. Before telling you of this psychological technique, it is only fair to point out that the professional hypnotist varies his approach from subject to subject, not only to suit the needs of the subject, but to break the monotony of using only a few successful procedures. His experimentation helps develop not only new procedures, but new concepts relative to the general nature of hypnosis and its many ramifications. I was interested to see what would happen to a subject if he thought he was deeply hypnotized without ever giving him verbal suggestions or reassurance that he would feel better or overcome his problem. Of course, if the technique did not work quickly, I would drop the procedure for a more orthodox approach. Instead of trying to really hypnotize the subject, my aim is to get him to sleep. Once he is asleep, I let him remain so for about 30 minutes. Without having ever given him a therapeutic suggestion, I awaken him and inquire if he remembered what happened. If the answer is no, I tell him I'll hypnotize him again next week, and this concludes the visit. When he returns next week, I ask him, "How did you feel during the week?" The answer is generally, "Much better." I keep repeating this procedure until such a time that the individual has attained the goals that he seeks. I know that the reader may be surprised that I would divulge such an unconventional procedure. The principle is the same as the physician using a placebo. I do so to illustrate the point that I made earlier in this chapter, that so long as certain of the subject's requirements are met, whether valid or invalid, the subject's suggestibility is greatly enhanced. Naturally, the unsuspecting subject equated the period of not remembering, which was, as we know, true sleep, with the somnambulistic state. Actually, he was helped by self-hypnosis because he felt he would now make progress because he proved to be such an excellent subject. It is true, he was not using self-hypnosis, as has been outlined in this book, but he had now achieved a heightened state of suggestibility, hypnosis, and was using this state to further his own ends. The attainment of self-hypnosis can be an intricate and elusive procedure, as I have already pointed out. The purpose of the entire book is to instruct, point out, and give you the necessary understanding and knowledge required to achieve this end. Without this understanding, this can become a very frustrating effort. It is hoped that by understanding and being aware of some of the ramifications of hypnosis, you will be able to achieve your goal in the quickest possible time. It should also be pointed out that no two subjects react in the same way, and that different methods and requirements are necessary to suit the individual. It is a mistake to try to make the subject adhere to a rigid methodology. The greater flexibility of the hypnotic procedures, the greater the chance for success. Let me, at this time, further discuss some of the hypnotic aids that are used in the induction of hypnosis. We have already discussed the use of the hypnodisc and the crystal ball and chain. The same principles are involved in any other object which is used as a means of fixation or of tiring the eyes. Hypnotic phonograph records and hypnotic tape recordings represent new devices that have been instrumental in conditioning subjects for self-hypnosis. The subject plays the record or tape on his phonograph or tape recorder and is conditioned over a period of time to respond to hypnosis at a given signal or phrase. He, in turn, can change this key phrase to one of his own choosing. Should you own or have access to a tape recorder, I would suggest recording an induction of hypnosis and playing it back to yourself in this manner, as though you were hypnotizing someone else. I have produced 3 different hypnotic records and a 30-minute hypnotic tape containing the 3 records which are sold commercially. One record, called the musical hypnosis record, has a very pleasant, relaxing musical background as the voice of the hypnotist induces hypnosis. The second record, called the metronome hypnotic record, incorporates the monotonous and lulling beat of an electric metronome in the background. The subject is instructed to mentally repeat sleep as he slowly inhales and deep sleep as he slowly exhales in rhythm with the beat of the metronome. While the subject is concentrating on this activity, the voice of the hypnotist induces hypnosis. The third record, called Self-Hypnosis, record number 3, contains only the voice of the hypnotist inducing hypnosis. It features a unique approach and technique. I have had a great deal of correspondence with those who have used these phonograph records and the hypnotic tape for conditioning themselves for self-hypnosis. The results are quite interesting and run the range of immediate results to no results. One person wrote that one of the records hypnotized him at the first playing and conditioned him for self-hypnosis, whereas he had failed to respond to hypnosis after many visits to one of the country's foremost authorities. I have had similar experiences after having failed to hypnotize a subject, despite many attempts. I can only speculate that the subjects in these cases unconsciously resist the hypnotist because they feel a personal threat. Since the record is impersonal, they are better able to relax and subsequently be hypnotized. Interestingly, this occurred when the subject was convinced that he was a very difficult subject. It would seem that only then was the conditioned response pattern finally established. The basic function of the hypnotic records and hypnotic tape is to establish a conditioned response pattern to a given stimulus. In time, most subjects are conditioned by the intelligent and systematic use of these recordings. Let me describe another varied approach to achieving self-hypnosis. One of the chief assets of a good hypnotist is to be flexible in his approach in hypnotizing his subjects. As I have already pointed out, it is necessary many times to adopt a technique that is suitable to the subject and not to make the subject adapt himself to the method of induction. We know that with the somnambulistic subjects, any procedure will put the subject under hypnosis immediately. The hypnotist gains complete control of his subject as the subject is able to put himself in the proper psychological frame of mind for hypnosis. Unfortunately, most subjects do not respond at the first session or sessions because of conscious or subconscious fears that must be gradually eliminated. Once you get the subject to relax or let go, he will naturally succumb to hypnosis. This is the problem that confronts all hypnotists. Merely suggesting to the subject to relax is not sufficient, as a rule, to bring about this desired mental state. The subject, at this point, cannot easily turn on or off his mental and physical feelings. Even if we have the subject lie down, this does not assure the hypnotic state, as the subject can still be tense. Our main problem is to get the subject relaxed. Our situation is similar to the physician telling his patient to go home and forget about a certain problem. I'm sure you'll agree that the advice is virtually impossible to follow. One of the major stumbling blocks in hypnotizing a subject or in self-hypnosis lies in the fact that although we use terms such as relax, let yourself go, and others, the subject cannot readily put the meaning of these words into effect. It is difficult for most people to let go when we live in a society that beckons us to look sharp, be alert, be on the ball, and make every minute count. Emphasis on productivity does not lend to a society of relaxed individuals. In my long experience as a professional hypnotist, I have tried many novel innovations for inducing hypnosis and teaching individuals self-hypnosis. Some have met with a great deal of success, and others have failed. It is, furthermore, difficult to determine the causal nature for success or failure. We can only theorize. I have used the following unorthodox technique for about a period of 15 years. Exceptionally good results have been attained with it, although it must be admitted that it is not infallible. It is suggested to you as another good technique. In order to help the subject relax, I have been using a phonograph record or tape that I recorded containing the continuous sound of various degrees of rain. One side has a half hour of very soft, light rainfall, such as you have experienced in listening to rain falling on grass, canvas, or a tent top. The other side or track contains a half hour of rain effects such as one would hear in a heavy downfall with loud splatterings of water on the pavement. The record and tape were originally designed to help insomnia sufferers and later incorporated into the hypnotic procedure. The subject is instructed to close his eyes and listen to the sound of the rain while picturing himself relaxing near a warm, glowing fireplace. As you can note, the subject again incorporates the visual imagery technique. The relaxing effect thus produced over a period of time enhances his chances of success in attaining a deep hypnotic state. There are many other interesting and unique devices and aids you can use for inducing hypnosis. Rather than present them all in this book, I have fully described them and their techniques of operation on a 144-page illustrated catalog. This catalog not only contains a list of hypnotic aids, but a description and listing of over 450 hypnotism and self-help books. Upon request, I shall be pleased to send it to you. Write to Melvin Powers, 12015 Sherman Road, North Hollywood, California, 91605, and ask for Hypnotic Catalog Number 7. Should you have any questions on self-hypnosis or hetero-hypnosis, I shall be pleased to answer you. End of Chapter 11. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 12 of A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis by Melvin Powers. Chapter 12. The Nature of Hypnosis. Although the nature and phenomena of hypnosis are still incompletely understood, there are a multitude of theories which attempt to explain its mechanism and results. The most that can be done at this time is to explore various views which are held by leading authorities at present. It can be said, however, that a majority of authorities agree that hypnosis ensues as a result of natural laws which have been incorporated in the human organism since the beginning of man as he is today. The older theories show almost as much disparity as today, but for the purposes of history it is probably necessary to enumerate only the animal magnetism of Frederick Anton Mesmer, and a mention of the hysteria syndrome by Jean Martin Charcot. Both names loom large in the history of hypnosis. Mesmer, an 18th century physician, believed that hypnosis occurred as a result of vital fluids drawn from a magnet or lotus stone, and which drew their unique qualities from the sun, moon, and stars. Charcot, as well as Pierre Janet and others, was convinced that hypnosis was a form of hysteria, and that only hysterics could be hypnotized. The former, Mesmer, thought further that metal became imbued by the solar qualities, and his system is also known as metallurgy, by which he meant the proper application of metals. Naturally, these theories have been largely abandoned today, although there are still a few who think that hypnosis is a form of hysteria. Some pioneers, notably Dr. William S. Kroger, a psychiatrically oriented obstetrician and gynecologist who limits his practice to hypnotherapy, believes hypnosis is a conviction phenomenon which produces results that parallel the phenomena produced at Lourdes and other religious healing shrines. His formula is that faith, hope, belief, and expectation, all catalyzed by the imagination, lead inevitably to hypnosis. He, like Emile Coué before him, is convinced that you cannot will yourself to be hypnotized, and that whenever the will and the imagination come into conflict, the imagination will win out. This fits in perfectly, of course, with the author's already discussed visual imagery techniques, which require a high degree of imagination. Dr. Kroger, like a few others, has proved to his own satisfaction that all hypnotic phenomena can be produced at a non-hypnotic level. A large number of hypnotists, including the author, has come to believe that hypnosis is a semantic problem in which words are the building blocks to success. Not just any words, but words which ring a bell or tap the experiential background of the subject. This is why sleep continues to be in the lexicon of the hypnotist, even though hypnosis is the antithesis of sleep. The word is used because hypnosis superficially resembles sleep inasmuch as the eyes usually are closed, the body in a posture of complete relaxation. Actually, the mind is hyperacute. Pavlov, however, believed that there was an analogy between sleep and hypnosis, in that each involves cerebral inhibition. Words, of course, would be of little use without the added effect of his conditioned reflexology. Probably the most widely held theory is that hypnosis is a transference phenomenon in which the prestige of the hypnotist and his relationship to the subject play an important role. This theory is bolstered by the fact that all schools of psychotherapy yield approximately the same results, even though the methods differ. This would logically indicate that the relationship between the therapist and the subject was the determining factor. The only trouble with this theory is that it does not explain self-hypnosis. On the other hand, we know that a strong interpersonal relationship is necessary for hypnosis. In the opening chapter of the book, I explained that hypnosis was a state of heightened suggestion in which the subject adopted an uncritical attitude, allowing him to accept suggestions and to take appropriate action. This is excellent as far as it goes, but it does not explain how suggestion works. This is the crux of the hypnotic dilemma, and the answer is far from solved. Hypnotists are much like those who use electricity every day of their lives, but have no idea of the nature of electricity. It is enough for them to know it has been harnessed for their use. If there is one thing virtually certain about hypnosis, it is that some parts of the brain are inhibited and other parts expanded by the process. Pinpoint concentration is given as the reason for this selective procedure, which narrows the horizon of the subject to what the hypnotist, or he himself, is saying, screening out all other stimuli. But why is this high order of concentration so easy under hypnosis, when Asians, notably the Chinese, have been trying for centuries to concentrate on one subject for as long as 4 or 5 seconds? We do not know the mechanics of this metamorphosis of an ordinary brain into an organ of concentrated power. According to Janet, this is accomplished through the formation of a group of unconscious memories and activities, which takes over the usual stream of consciousness type of thinking. It is implied that the process may be atavistic. One of the newer theories, one held by Dr. Louis R. Wolberg, a psychoanalyst, is that hypnosis is a psychosomatic process in that it is both physiological and psychological in character. Physiologically, Wolberg believes that hypnosis represents an inhibition of the higher cortical centers and a limitation of sensory channels, such as takes place in sleep. He also believes that the psychological process operates through transference. Others agree that it is a transference process, but that it is more of an extension of the subject's own psychic processes, which is enlarged to include the voice of the hypnotist or his own thoughts or voice. Incidentally, an excellent book along these theoretical lines is Hypnotism: An Objective Study in Suggestibility, by Andre M. Weitzenhofer, Ph.D. The newest theory in the field is of particular interest to those reading this book, inasmuch as it postulates that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, that the patient always hypnotizes himself, and that it is a wise hypnotist who knows who is hypnotizing whom. This is a logical conclusion, and it disperses any ideas that hypnotic patients become dependent on their therapists. Actually, hypnotists today always teach their subjects self-hypnosis so that any chance of dependency is obviated. Milton V. Kline, professor of psychology at Long Island University, postulates that hypnosis is primarily retrogressive. He has written that the organism functions differently on various levels of behavior, regression, and that the behavior breaks down into component parts. The theory that regression can spotlight personality disorders found in more infantile states is also widely held. He is also a proponent of the idea that hypnosis is an abnormal manifestation of a normal process, an opinion he shares with many. Dr. Klein thinks that retrogression and regression alter perceptions and feelings, and in the case of the latter, causes us to go backward in time to a point where re-education may be employed. This is a legitimate use of regression, although it is not used so much these days to uncover past traumatic incidents. Actually, regression, by duplicating the exact earlier age, manner of speech and thought, etc., makes us once more as little children, a condition to be desired for certain forms of therapy. An atavistic theory, held to some extent by Dr. Jerome N. Schneck, Clinical Associate Professor of Psychiatry, State University of New York College of Medicine, is that hypnosis should be equated with states of immobilization on the basis of his observation that some subjects equate hypnosis with death. He suggests that it is comparable to the death feint of animals to avoid danger. Others, primarily Europeans, have pointed out the analogy between the hypnotic state of animals and man. Another widely held theory is that hypnosis is a state of dissociation, meaning that it constitutes a group of unconscious memories and activities which may be dredged up to replace the stream of consciousness. Automatism, of course, is inherently part of this view and is presumed to negate volition. Activity of the cerebrum, which controls the conscious and voluntary system, is rendered non-operational. My own thoughts on the matter are that hypnosis results from, first of all, a good transference; secondly, from a conditioned reflex; thirdly, from the person acting as a hypnotized person, role playing; and fourthly, from a suspension of the critical faculties. Along the last named line, I believe that hypnotic suggestions have an autonomy of their own which supersede all else in the hypnotic situation. There are many more theories I believe are partially correct, but the ones named will do for the purposes of this volume. Incidentally, all the hypnosis theories presented here are equally applicable to self-hypnosis, except where, as in transference, it is obvious a therapist is needed. In conclusion, the author would like to take issue with those who believe that it is the monotonous intonations of the therapist that cause the subject to lapse from the deeply relaxed state into true sleep. I have observed many times, by comparing verbalization with silence, that the former gives the subject's mind a focal point of attention which prevents him from entering a deep state where hypnotherapy is impossible. Like the man who cannot sleep because of an active mind, sleep and mere thoughts and suggestions are incompatible, and I believe, once a hypnotic state has been attained, that the subject is kept awake unless definite sleep suggestions are given by the therapist's series of suggestions. We have discussed the effect of the experiential background at length, and surely nothing connotates sleep more than closing one's eyes, test number 1. And so, in my view, you are doing two things when you talk to the subject. You are giving him helpful suggestions, but you are also keeping him awake and hyperacute so that these suggestions will sink in. End of chapter 12. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 13 of A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis by Melvin Powers. Chapter 13. Practical Applications of Self-Hypnosis. With hypnosis on the march, there is practically no limit to its uses in the field of medicine, and new applications are being discovered every day. It should not be necessary to add, however, that some of these uses should remain as they are, in the hands of professionals with years of experience in the area. One of the themes of this book has been that laymen should use hypnosis discriminately and intelligently. No responsible therapist would ever recommend masking or removing a symptom which was indicative of organic disease. For that reason, The practical uses of self-hypnosis will be limited to measures that can be taken safely by the layman. The only possible exception to this will be instruction on how to curb obesity, but even here it is suggested that a physician be consulted before embarking on a weight-reducing program. The foremost use of hypnosis has been for relaxation, and it becomes more and more important as world tensions, anxiety, and strain increase daily, and millions seek vainly to get away from it all. Inasmuch as all methods of hypnosis discussed in this book utilized relaxation as the first step, it should not be necessary to go over this material. Simply review the many induction techniques. Lung cancer has become a very real threat to many people today, and the professional hypnotist is besieged with men and women who wish to curtail or quit smoking. This is easier said than done, because smoking, although there are no physical withdrawal symptoms when one stops, is a strong conditioned reflex, and cannot, except in rare instances, be accomplished by the will alone. The best way to stop smoking is to make it an impossibility, and that is exactly what you do when you follow the method touched on in an earlier chapter. All of us have tasted or smelled certain foods or medicines that nauseate us. The subject who wishes to quit smoking is asked to conjure up the vision and the actual taste and smell of the substances which upset his stomach and offend his nostrils, transferring its properties to cigarettes. This, of course, must be done under hypnosis. The subject then conditions himself in the following manner. 1. This cigarette tastes and smells just like mention name of repugnant substance. 2. It is the most vile and repugnant taste I have ever encountered, and I shall not be able to continue after the third puff. At the third puff, I will develop a paroxysm of coughing. 3. I cannot smoke the cigarette any longer, and I will have to put it out. This sounds like a simple procedure, and yet it has worked for thousands. Some switch to chewing gum or candy, but the cure essentially lies in substituting one conditioned reflex for another. This is comparatively easy with hypnosis because, unlike narcotics, barbiturates, or alcohol, smoking is purely a psychological addiction. There is no need for tapering off. Stopping drinking, unlike smoking, doesn't involve merely the creation of physical aversion to the drug. The patient's entire personality should be changed, and more mature viewpoints substituted for the unrealistic and infantile viewpoints which led to the addiction in the first place. The subject should give himself suggestions that he will be able to face up to the problems of everyday life without recourse to the crutch of alcohol. It is a well-known fact that nothing is as bad as we think it is going to be once we confront it. One of the strange aspects of drinking is that it is actually a form of self-hypnosis, and the cure lies in substituting a new viewpoint for the old. This fact can be demonstrated by the fact that drinking is begun in the first place so that the individual can be one of the boys, or because it is the thing to do. Those who do not drink, at least as a social lubricant, according to this code, are squares. Because of this, self-hypnosis must be directed toward reorienting one's sense of values. Sober reflection should convince anyone that the truly intelligent person does not drink to excess. Nail biting is an unsightly habit, one that may even hinder one's social acceptance. The help lies in a therapeutic approach similar to that for cigarettes. It is not hard to predict that many of those reading these pages are suffering from overweight. With 30 million Americans in this category, it has become one of the nation's chief health problems, and it is the predisposing factor in many other diseases, such as heart trouble, diabetes, hypertension, and atherosclerosis. If you are overweight, it is well to remember that, unless you are 1 in a million, you cannot blame your glands. The plain truth is that you eat too much. We know today that overeating for some is an emotional problem, stemming from feelings of rejection and insecurity. Individuals who feel unloved, whether this is truly the case or not, make up for this lack to themselves by stuffing in large quantities of food. It would even appear that these people are masochistic, making themselves even more unloved by their gross gastronomical habits. A big factor in overweight in women is raiding the refrigerator while doing their housework. Many of them do this so unconsciously that they swear they eat less than most people. There are a number of appetite-curbing drugs on the market today, but they should not be necessary for anyone who has acquired self-hypnosis. If you have learned to visualize yourself, visual imagery, in different situations, you will have no trouble in picturing yourself having a slim, attractive figure, exactly as you were when you felt you looked your best. Keep this figure ever in mind and use it along with conditioning yourself against certain fatty and starchy foods. A trick used by some hypnotherapists is to have the subject purchase a dress or suit several sizes too small and then work toward being able to wear it. This actually has worked in many cases because it adds the element of competitiveness to the procedure. Not all people overeat because of emotional problems. Some come from families where licking the platter clean was the rule because food was scarce. Others come from rich families where overeating by the parents established a habit pattern in the children. Certain races and nationalities look on fat as a badge of wealth and prestige, and children in such an environment are likely to be deliberately overfed. Regardless of the reason for overweight, however, the use of self-hypnosis is one of the answers to the problem. Simple headaches, arthritis, neuritis, and other painful symptoms yield readily to hypnotic suggestion. If physicians have given up on the problem and placed a subject on a maintenance drug dosage for pain, hypnosis can potentiate the drugs or even obviate them. Two of the major uses of hypnosis are in childbirth and for intractable pain of cancer or some other incurable diseases. Although patients usually start with heterohypnosis, they are put on self-hypnosis as soon as possible, and there are many cases of women waiting too long and having their babies at home painlessly through self-hypnosis. The father invariably is the only one excited in such cases. The mother knows that she is an excellent subject and has been instructed in prenatal classes about every contingency that could arise. Inasmuch as stopping the birth pangs is similar to stopping other pain, the method should be learned so that it can be accomplished in a minimum of time. The best way to stop pain is to let your right arm slowly rise while you are under hypnotic suggestion. Do not help it. If the suggestions are strong enough, it will float up. As soon as the arm is straight overhead, you should give yourself the suggestion that it is as rigid and unbending as a bar of steel. Following this, a suggestion is given that the hand is beginning to tingle and become numb. As soon as the numbness has spread throughout the entire hand, it will be insensible to pain. The hand is then placed against the part of the body where the pain exists, and you will feel the numbness flowing from the hand to the affected area. This happens as a result of your suggestions and is the method followed by most subjects. Only a deep somnambulistic subject is able to remove pain by direct suggestion to the painful part. There are many people today using self-hypnosis in the realm of sports, and an entire book has been written on improving one's golf game with this method. It is called How You Can Play Better Golf Using Self-Hypnosis by Jack Heiss, Wilshire Book Company, publishers. Dr. Huber Grimm, team physician of the Seattle University basketball team, recently related the results when Dave Mills, a 6'5" junior forward, asked for his help because he froze during competition. He had been benched on the eve of the West Coast Athletic Conference tournament in San Francisco. Spectators made Mills so fearful that he was afraid he would make mistakes, and in this frame of mind, of course, he did. Under hypnosis, Dr. Grimm suggested to Dave that he would be unaware of the spectators, be completely relaxed, and would play exceedingly well. Dr. Grimm asked coach Vince Cazzetta to allow Dave to play, and the result was astounding. Mills scored 60 points and cleared 63 rebounds, and his brilliant play led to his selection on an all-tournament team. "All I did was free his spirit," Dr. Grimm reported. "He was in need of confidence, and I gave it to him through hypnosis." The Associated Press told the story as follows: Dave Mills, a vacuum cleaner off the backboards, led a fast-breaking Seattle University team to victory last night. It was hard to recognize Mills as the same player who has been with the Chieftains all year. Dr. William S. Kroger, a pioneer in hypnosis, undertook to improve the batting of a professional baseball player, with equally sensational results. The player had been banned, and his fear of a reoccurrence was so strong that he became plate shy. He had changed his batting stance so that he always had one foot in the bucket, so that he could back away from the plate more quickly. He was given a post-hypnotic suggestion that such an event happening again was exceedingly remote, and this was amplified by suggestions of confidence that he would immediately start slugging as well as ever. His batting average soared immediately. Dr. Michio Ikea, professor of physiology at Tokyo University, and Dr. Arthur H. Steinhaus of the George Williams Laboratory of Physiologic Research in Physical Education, Chicago, have proved that track men can far surpass their best previous times under hypnosis. Their tests, incidentally, prove that there is no danger of an athlete going beyond his physiologic limit while bettering his former marks. They attribute the superior performances to the removal of inhibitions which psychologically prevent an athlete from doing his best. This report was made before the International Congress on Health and Fitness in the Modern World, held in Rome during the last Olympic Games. All reports, as a matter of fact, show that athletic performances are improved by psychological, not physical means, and that built-in automatic reflexes protect the athlete against the danger of overexertion at all levels of awareness, hypnotic or non-hypnotic. Psychologists are using hypnosis more and more to facilitate concentration and learning, and it is likely this use of the ancient science will become even more popular than its medical applications. The reason one learns so quickly under hypnosis is because of time distortion, which allows you to obtain the equivalent of many hours of study in a relatively short length of time. Undoubtedly, you have had experience with time distortion in your daily life. Remember how slowly time goes when you are not interested in what you are doing, and how fast it speeds by when you are. And the drowning man who sees his whole life go by is an excellent example of this. Enough people have been saved to know that this actually happens. The point is that the subconscious mind does not record the passage of time the same way as the conscious mind. The conscious mind records time physically by means of a clock. It is objective, and it tells you that a thought or movement requires a certain number of seconds, minutes, hours, or days. Your subconscious mind has an entirely different concept of time that has nothing to do with the physical world. It is called subjective because your own sense of the passage of time is used. Personal time varies according to the circumstances in which you find yourself. Haven't you noticed that when you are happy or extremely interested in something, time passes quickly? On the other hand, if you are sad or anxious, time seems to drag. This is called time distortion. When you continue in a happy state, time is automatically shortened. When you are in a state of unhappiness, pain, or anxiety, time automatically lengthens. This explains why the drowning man can review his entire life within seconds. Psychologists know this is possible because your subconscious mind contains a complete record of everything that has happened to you since birth. Therefore, in moments of extreme distress, your subconscious has the ability to distort and manipulate time. If you have ever encountered danger or had a narrow escape, you probably experienced time distortion. Everything about you went into slow motion, and time seemed to stand still until the action was over. At that point, objective time started up again, and everything returned to normal. Many of you no doubt read an Associated Press report from Chicago on February 11, 1958, which reported how movie actress Linda Darnell had used hypnosis to help her with her first stage role. She had been asked to do the part on short notice and had no time for preparation. Miss Darnell telephoned her California physician for aid. He flew to Chicago. Overnight, through hypnosis, Miss Darnell learned her part and astounded the cast by knowing everyone's lines. Not only did she learn the part, but she was coached in the character of the artist she was portraying. As a result, Late Love was a hit play. Miss Darnell was under the impression she had been learning the part for a week, although only about 48 hours were involved, and these hours were not continuous. After her first performance, she said, "I never felt so secure about playing a role in my life. Hypnosis has helped me feel the part completely." Imagine how much more we are going to be able to learn when study under hypnosis becomes widespread. And the best part of it is that the learning is in your mind for a long time. Forgetting or mental blocks that interfere with your recall of information at any time are reduced to a minimum. In conclusion, I should like to recommend the entire field of self-hypnosis to everyone. It is a therapy which is positive, dynamic, and constructive. An excellent example of this is contained in the autobiography, Rachmaninoff's Recollections. In this book, immortal Rachmaninoff describes in detail his success in overcoming a severe case of mental depression. He had stopped composing and kept to himself, seldom leaving his room. After meeting with failure, using the available therapeutic remedies available at that time, he was persuaded by his relatives, the Satins, to seek the help of a hypnotist called Dr. Dahl. With much reluctance, he agreed to see Dr. Dahl and be treated specifically with hypnosis. Rachmaninoff's own words read as follows: "Although it may sound incredible, hypnosis really helped me. Already at the beginning of the summer I began again to compose. The material grew in bulk and new musical ideas began to stir within me, far more than I needed for my concerto. I felt that Dr. Dahl's treatment had strengthened my nervous system to a miraculous degree. Out of gratitude, I dedicated my second concerto to him. As the piece had a great success in Moscow, everyone began to wonder what possible connection it could have with Dr. Dahl. The truth, however, was known to Dr. Dahl, the Satins, and myself." Does this story sound incredible? You have the word of one of the world's greatest musical composers that hypnosis alleviated his severe despondency. This is proof that the emotions of the individual can be changed by the ideas he builds up about himself. Dr. Leland E. Hincie, professor of psychiatry, Columbia University, writing in his book, The Person in the Body, W. W. Norton & Company, states, "In some persons, the fear of disease is often the only damaging evidence of disease, yet it can be so strong as to disable the person in all his daily activities. The entire field of psychosomatic medicine, which deals with the interrelationship between body and mind, has as one of its basic tenets that suggestion not only can cause psychological personality disorders, but many physical disorders as well. It is therefore logical to conclude that the systematic use of positive mental attitudes in an organized, progressive self-improvement program can be a vital influence in helping you lead a healthier life, both emotionally and physically." Many people in need of help are at a loss as to where they can locate reputable hypnotherapists in their area. You may consult your family physician, county medical society, or mental hygiene society. The chairman of the psychology department at your nearest college or university would usually have this information. I maintain a file of over 4,000 doctors located all over the world who practice hypnosis and would be pleased to refer you to doctors located in your locality. The following national organizations maintain a specialized list: American Academy of Child Psychiatry, 335 South Franklin Street, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. American Academy of Psychoanalysis, 750 Park Avenue, New York 21, New York. American Group Psychotherapy Association, 2 East 103rd Street, New York 29, New York. American Psychiatric Association, 1700 18th Street, Northwest, Washington 9, D.C. American Psychological Association, 1333 16th Street, Northwest, Washington, D.C. American Speech and Hearing Association, 10801 Rockville Pike, Rockville, Maryland, 20852. National Association for Mental Health, 10 Columbus Circle, New York 19, New York. National Association for Retarded Children, Incorporated, 99 University Place, New York 3, New York. National Council on Alcoholism, Incorporated, 2 East 103rd Street, New York 29, New York. National Health Council, 1790 Broadway, New York 19, New York. National Institute of Mental Health, U.S. Public Health Service, Bethesda 14, Maryland. Veterans Administration, Psychiatry and Neurology Service, Department of Medicine. End of Chapter 13. Recording by Andrea Fiore. End of A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis by Melvin Powers.